It was a gradual thing, the way Amanda started pulling away. At first, I barely noticed just a missed kiss goodnight here, a late arrival from work there. But over time, it became impossible to ignore. She'd stopped lingering in our morning routine, instead rushing out of the house as if late, even though she was usually on time. And our conversations became shallow, lacking the warmth that once held us together. In those moments, I told myself it was temporary, that Amanda was simply stressed. Work had been more demanding for her recently, or so she said. But there were signs that something wasn't quite right, things that only now began to catch my attention. She'd started buying new clothes out of the blue, items that didn't match her usual taste. She'd spend more time in front of the mirror, adjusting her makeup, which was odd because she'd never been one to fuss over appearances. When I brought it up, she'd brush it off with a laugh, saying she just felt like a change. One night, everything came to a head. I came home later than usual, hoping maybe she'd still be up, waiting for me with that warm smile I'd known for years. But instead, I was greeted by a faint floral scent lingering in the air. There on the dining table sat a perfume bottle, elegant, high-end, and unmistakably feminine. It was wrapped in a way that clearly suggested it was a gift. A strange feeling washed over me. Amanda had never mentioned buying herself something like this. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the bottle and inspected it, recognizing the brand as one she'd never shown interest in before. For years, she had worn a specific type of fragrance, something I'd gifted her on our first anniversary. This was different, exotic in a way that didn't feel like her style. I put it back down as I heard her footsteps behind me. "Oh, you're home," she said, with a startled look. I gestured to the perfume. "Is this new?" She hesitated, but only for a second. "Oh, yes. I decided to treat myself after a hard week at work," she replied with a casual shrug. "Just something to lift my spirits." Something felt off in her tone, a flatness to her response that left me uneasy. I wanted to question her more, but something stopped me. Instead, I nodded and changed the topic, yet the uneasiness settled in my chest like a weight. Her explanation didn't sit right. For as long as we'd been together, I had known Amanda to be straightforward and warm, never evasive or secretive. But that night, there was a distance I couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, I became hyper-aware of the subtle shifts in her behavior. Amanda would pull out her phone with a new, almost compulsive urgency, quickly putting it down if I was in the room. She laughed less, the sparkle in her eyes replaced by something guarded. Sometimes I would catch her staring off into space, a soft smile on her lips, as if lost in thought. When I asked her what she was thinking about, she would simply say, "Oh, nothing," and change the subject. And the physical distance between us grew, too. Our intimate moments dwindled to almost nothing, and even when we did share a quiet evening together, she seemed miles away. It wasn't like Amanda at all, and yet she acted as if nothing had changed. Every time I tried to ask her if everything was all right, she'd dismiss it with a reassuring smile, telling me I was overthinking. But I wasn't the same naive guy she might have expected me to be. Something wasn't adding up, and I felt like I was the only one noticing it. And then came the night I overheard her on the phone. She was in the kitchen, her voice low and hurried. I couldn't make out all of her words, but the parts one caught were unsettling. Phrases like "next time" and "soon." I wanted to confront her right then and there, but something told me to hold back, to let things play out a bit longer. I needed to be sure before jumping to conclusions. If I was wrong, I could ruin everything over what might just be a misunderstanding. Over the next few weeks, my mind became a battleground, torn between doubt and hope. Amanda became more elusive, with reasons to stay late at work cropping up more often. And I, once the trusting husband, found myself tallying each of these little signs, each one taking on a weight that was impossible to ignore. Then came a Saturday evening, a rare night where neither of us had plans. I decided to make dinner, thinking that maybe a quiet evening together might bring back the closeness we'd lost. But the entire night, she seemed preoccupied, glancing at her phone more than once as if waiting for something. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her day, her week, even little things I knew she liked to talk about. Her responses were brief, often followed by long, awkward silences. When I asked if she wanted to watch a movie, she declined, claiming she was exhausted and needed to catch up on sleep. I watched her head up the stairs, feeling a mixture of frustration and helplessness. Whatever was happening, I was clearly being shut out of her life, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. Amanda had always been the one who kept us together, the one who made our relationship feel alive. Now, she seemed like a stranger. That night, as I lay alone in bed, I felt the finality of it sink in. Our connection had been severed, and for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't sure if I'd ever find a way to reconnect. I tried to ignore it at first. Told myself Amanda's distance was just a phase, maybe work-related stress. But the doubts that had rooted themselves in my mind were hard to shake. Every late evening, every vague excuse only seemed to confirm the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. One night, the proof I dreaded appeared delivered by nothing more than a simple notification chime. Amanda had fallen asleep early, lying beside me with her back turned, her breathing slow and steady. As I lay there, unable to sleep, her phone buzzed quietly on her nightstand. At first, I brushed it off, trying to respect her privacy, but the light flashing on the phone caught my eye. Something about it was different, like it wasn't the usual sound of an email or text, but a notification from an app one didn't recognize. I felt a mixture of dread and curiosity as I reached over and picked up her phone. The screen lit up, revealing a message preview. My heart raced as I read the few words displayed. "Thanks for a great evening. Can't wait for next time." The message was from a chat app one had never seen on her phone before. An unknown number displayed above the text. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I had to sit down to steady myself, trying to process what I just read. "Thanks for a great evening." The words replayed in my head, each time more damning than the last. It took everything in me not to wake her up right then and demand an explanation. But I hesitated, reminding myself of the few pieces of evidence I had. A bottle of unfamiliar perfume, long nights at work, a sudden, inexplicable coldness between us. Maybe I was reading too much into it, seeing something that wasn't really there. Maybe, I realized, as I looked back at that message again, my fears were about to be confirmed. I set her phone back down, careful not to disturb her, and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling my mind spin with questions. Who was sending her these messages? When did she start talking to someone else? How many great evenings had there been, and how many more would follow? The following morning, Amanda woke up before I did, already in the bathroom when I finally got out of bed. I went downstairs, trying to collect myself, acting like everything was normal. She came down a little while later, her face fresh and hair pulled back, the same way she always looked on mornings when she was rushing off somewhere. Except, she wasn't heading to work today. It was a Saturday. "Early plans?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual as she poured herself a cup of coffee. She looked up, caught off guard by my question. "Oh, just a few errands," she replied, brushing it off with a lightness that felt rehearsed. "Maybe I'll grab lunch with Sarah if she's free." She was looking past me, not meeting my gaze, and her voice was strangely controlled. The tone was calm, maybe even nonchalant, but it didn't hide the slight nervousness in her eyes. I pressed on, just enough to test her story. "Tell Sarah I said hi. You two haven't met up in a while." Amanda smiled, but I saw her fingers tighten around her coffee mug. "Yeah, it's been a while," she said, then quickly changed the subject, asking about my day instead. I forced a smile, answered as naturally as I could, and let her redirect the conversation. She clearly wanted to keep things light, to brush off any suspicions I might have. But there it was, a tiny crack in the story she had so carefully crafted. She was covering something up. I could see it in the way she hurried through the kitchen, gathering her keys and bag without lingering the way she usually did on weekends. As she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, replaying the events in my mind, feeling like I was missing some crucial detail. A few hours later, I found myself pacing the house, unable to focus on anything else. The message on her phone had ignited a fire in me, a desperate need to know the truth. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet, but I knew I needed to find out more before I could face her with anything substantial. I thought about checking her phone again, but Amanda rarely left it unattended. Then an idea struck me. I could install a tracking app, something that would help me monitor her messages without her knowing. It felt underhanded, something I never thought I'd do. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Over the next few days, I found myself analyzing every text and call Amanda received, quietly noting every time she went out for errands or worked late. A few evenings later, my suspicions were confirmed. I watched as Amanda glanced at her phone, the faintest smile curving her lips as she read something on the screen, her fingers hovering over the keys, typing out a reply and quickly hiding the phone back in her bag. It took everything I had to keep my face neutral, to act as though nothing was wrong, even as I felt my world slowly unraveling. I clung to the hope that maybe it was all just a terrible misunderstanding, that somehow, Amanda would tell me the truth and everything would be okay again. But with each day that passed, that hope grew smaller and smaller. One evening, when she stepped out to run a quick errand, I knew this was it. I waited until she was gone and quickly grabbed her phone from her nightstand. It was my chance to dig deeper. Opening her message history on the chat app, I scanned through her conversations, my heart pounding with each word. And there it was, undeniable proof of her betrayal. The messages were clear, describing plans to meet, reminiscing over previous nights, each message a tiny nail in the coffin of our marriage. It wasn't just one message from an unknown number. It was a series of them, each one more damning than the last. For the first time in our years together, I felt a cold rage settle over me. Amanda's hard weeks and busy days had been excuses, lies that she'd told me with a straight face, expecting me to trust her. As I closed her phone and set it back, a single, undeniable realization filled my mind. My wife was living a life I didn't recognize, with someone else. And now, there was no going back. The weight of what I'd uncovered sat with me, pressing down like a boulder I couldn't shake. For the first few days after finding the messages, I was on edge every moment, unsure of how to proceed. My emotions swung from anger to disbelief to a bitter sadness that stayed with me even when I tried to push it aside. I wanted answers, but I didn't want a confrontation without knowing more. I needed to approach her carefully, to see if she'd give herself away with even the slightest nudge. The following morning, as we sat at breakfast, I decided to test the waters. I brought up work, hers and mine, in an attempt to steer her toward the subject of her supposed late nights. "Amanda," I said, keeping my tone casual, "how's work been treating you? I feel like it's been keeping you really busy these days." She paused, mid-sip of her coffee, and her eyes flickered with something unreadable before she answered. "Oh, it's just the usual, you know. The deadlines are piling up, and they've needed me to stay later to help catch up." Her response was smooth, but the slight tension in her jaw betrayed her. It was a practiced answer, I realized, one she'd probably been preparing for a while. "Oh," I continued, feigning interest. "I know you've been putting in extra hours. Do they really have you working that hard every night?" I tried to hold her gaze, but she looked away quickly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She let out a small, nervous laugh, barely audible. "Well, not every night. Just whenever they need me, you know?" I nodded slowly, my suspicion hardening. Her answer felt more evasive than explanatory, and it only fueled my need to know more. "Makes sense. It's good to be dedicated, I guess," I said, forcing a light chuckle. But beneath the smile, my thoughts were racing. Throughout the next few days, I carefully chose moments to bring up her work meetings or plans to meet friends, hoping she'd offer more information on her own. But Amanda stayed vague, brushing off details and quickly changing the topic every time I tried to get her to elaborate. Her deflections only added fuel to the fire of my doubts. The final straw came on a Wednesday evening. Amanda was heading out, her outfit polished and her hair done up in a way that made her look like she was ready for more than a casual night out. I watched her slip her phone into her purse with an almost protective movement, as though she didn't want me anywhere near it. "Meeting with the girls again?" I asked as she grabbed her coat. She hesitated just a second too long. "Yeah, Sarah and I are just going to grab a drink. I might be late, so don't wait up." Her voice sounded cheerful, but there was a slight edge to it, like she was forcing herself to stay upbeat. It was another layer of pretense, and I could feel the truth slipping through the cracks in her words. "She left, and the silence in the house felt deafening. I stood by the window, watching her car disappear down the street, wondering what my next move should be. A direct confrontation was tempting, but something told me to hold off, to let her think she was still in control of her secrets. Instead, I called Lily. Lily was a close friend from work, someone I'd known long enough to trust with the raw truth. She had seen the toll Amanda's behavior was taking on me and had encouraged me to keep my head up. Now, she listened quietly as I poured out the latest events, her calm presence on the other end of the line grounding me. "Tom, you know what I think," she said after a pause. "You need proof before you confront her. Something undeniable that she can't talk her way out of." "That's just it, Lily," I replied, my voice low. "I've seen enough, but part of me still needs to hear her admit it." "But how?" After a beat, she said, "Look, Amanda works with a lot of people. Maybe I can reach out to a few of her colleagues discreetly, see if she's even been at these late meetings she keeps mentioning. No one has to know why I'm asking. I'll just be casual about it. Would you?" I asked, a surge of relief washing over me. I had never felt so grateful for a friend's support. The next day, Lily quietly gathered the information I needed. By the end of the afternoon, she called me with what I'd feared. Amanda's colleagues confirmed that she hadn't been working late on those nights. I felt a strange mix of relief and pain. It was like finally solving a puzzle but hating the picture that emerged. That night, as I sat across from Amanda at dinner, I watched her closely, feeling the weight of the truth between us. She had no idea I knew. She smiled, asked about my day, and made small talk as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and I couldn't keep pretending anymore. So, I started, making my voice sound as casual as I could. "I ran into someone from your work today. They mentioned not seeing you at the last couple of team meetings. Said they missed your late nights." I watched her face closely, waiting. For a second, a flicker of panic crossed her face. It was there, and then it was gone, replaced by a quick, practiced smile. "Oh, that's strange. I mean, maybe they just didn't see me. I've been swamped, working in different departments," she said, her words coming too quickly. I took a deep breath, the hurt bubbling just beneath the surface. "Amanda," I said, my voice firmer, "are you sure there isn't something you're not telling me?" For a split second, she looked vulnerable, almost caught. But then she steeled herself, her expression shifting into one of cool confidence. "Tom, you're imagining things," she replied, forcing a laugh. "There's nothing going on. I can't believe you're even asking me that." But I had seen it, her hesitation, her faltering smile. And I knew that no matter how convincing she tried to sound, the truth was sitting right between us. This was no longer a suspicion. I had caught her in the lie, and there was no turning back. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal gnawing at me. Amanda's calm denial, her practiced ease, it only made me more certain she was hiding something. I had tried to give her every chance to come clean, hoping she'd offer even a thread of honesty. But with each passing day, her deception weighed heavier, and the need for answers became unbearable. I knew I couldn't keep going like this alone. I needed help, someone I could trust completely, someone outside our situation who could see things clearly. That's when I reached out to Lily again. She had been a rock through everything, and I didn't feel the same sense of judgment or pity I feared from anyone else. She was just there, offering support without asking for anything in return. The next day at work, I asked her to meet me for coffee during our lunch break. We found a quiet spot in a small cafe near the office, and as soon as we sat down, I told her everything. From the suspicious behavior to the late nights and finally, to the messages I'd seen on Amanda's phone. Lily listened quietly, her expression a mix of sadness and determination. "Tom," she said after a moment, her voice gentle but firm, "you don't deserve to live with this kind of doubt. If she's not willing to tell you the truth, you need to find it for yourself." She didn't say anything else for a moment, just stirred her coffee slowly, lost in thought. "Look, I know a few people in Amanda's department. Maybe I could ask around a bit more, casually, and see if there's anything unusual they've noticed." "Lily, I don't want to drag you into this," I said, even though her offer felt like a lifeline. "It's my problem. You've already done enough." She shook her head, meeting my gaze with a steady look. "You're my friend, Tom. I hate to see you going through this alone. I'll be discreet, I promise. If there's something more going on, you deserve to know." I nodded, the weight of gratitude mixing with the ache of what I feared she might uncover. We finished our coffee in relative silence, with her assuring me she'd get in touch if she found anything. Over the next few days, I kept my head down at work, throwing myself into projects as a way to distract myself. Each time my phone buzzed, a surge of anxiety ran through me, wondering if it might be Lily with an update. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, she sent a message. "Hey, can you meet after work? There's something you need to know." My heart sank as I read her text, my worst fears bubbling to the surface. That evening, we met again at the same cafe. Lily's expression was solemn, her usual easy smile absent. She took a deep breath before she spoke, as if bracing herself for the impact her words would have. "I talked to a couple of Amanda's co-workers," she began, her voice steady. "They haven't seen her at any late meetings. In fact, they said she's rarely stayed past 5 these past few weeks. And the nights she claimed she was working late, she wasn't at the office." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt my stomach twist with a mix of anger and heartbreak. There it was, confirmation from an outside source, a piece of the puzzle I couldn't ignore. I'd held onto the faintest hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd been wrong. But hearing it from someone else, it solidified the truth I'd been running from. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "So, she's lying to me," I managed, the bitterness of the realization settling in. Lily reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on mine. "I'm so sorry, Tom. I know this isn't easy to hear. I wish it was different." We sat there in silence, the weight of her words filling the empty space between us. I had spent days, weeks even, trying to rationalize Amanda's behavior, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. But now, I couldn't deny it any longer. Amanda was living a double life, hiding something monumental from me, and I had no idea how deep it ran. I glanced at Lily, whose eyes were filled with compassion and understanding. In that moment, her presence felt like the only stable thing in my world, like a rock I could cling to as everything else crumbled around me. I felt a surge of gratitude, and something else, an unexpected warmth that had been absent from my life for a long time. "Thank you, Lily. I don't know what I'd do without you," I said, my voice cracking slightly. She smiled softly, squeezing my hand. "I'm here for you, Tom, whatever you need." Her support was the comfort I needed, and over the next few days, we talked often. She'd check in on me at work, sometimes inviting me to grab lunch or a coffee, giving me moments of normalcy amidst the chaos. I found myself looking forward to these small escapes, feeling lighter in her presence. She listened without judgment, offering advice only when I asked for it, and never once made me feel weak for the emotions I struggled to contain. But the more time I spent with Lily, the more I realized something deeper was growing between us. There was a warmth in her smile, a gentle reassurance in her voice that I hadn't felt in my marriage for a long time. I knew it was complicated, messy even, but I couldn't deny the comfort and safety she offered, a stark contrast to the coldness I faced at home. Then, one night, after another long and strained evening with Amanda, I received a text from Lily. "If you need to talk, I'm here. Anytime." In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Amanda's betrayal had left me shattered, but Lily's presence was slowly piecing me back together, helping me see the parts of myself I'd lost in my marriage. That night, I messaged her back, telling her how much her friendship meant to me. She replied with a simple, "You deserve to feel valued, Tom." It was a sentiment I hadn't heard in years, and it lingered with me long after we'd said goodnight. I knew things were changing between us, something quiet but profound. And though I wasn't sure what the future held, I finally felt I was moving toward the truth, not just about Amanda, but about myself and what I needed to find peace. In the days that followed, I resolved to face Amanda with the facts I'd gathered, ready to demand the truth. And whatever her answer, I knew I had Lily's unwavering support, a reminder that I didn't have to go through this alone. It had been days since Lily shared what she'd learned, and in that time, Amanda's deception continued in plain sight. Her late nights and vague explanations stacking up like bricks between us. Each excuse felt like a slap, a deliberate lie told with that familiar calmness she wore like armor. I was determined to hold my silence until I had something more concrete, something that left no room for Amanda's well-rehearsed denials. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I received a text from an old friend who worked at a popular restaurant downtown. I hadn't talked to Sam in a while, but we'd been close for years, often running into each other when I'd stop by his place for a coffee. Today's message, though, was anything but ordinary. "Hey man, hate to bring this up, but I think I saw Amanda here last week. She was with some guy I didn't recognize. They looked close. Are you guys okay?" My heart pounded, and a chill ran through me. I gripped my phone, trying to steady my hands. Sam wasn't the type to stir trouble. He wouldn't have reached out if he didn't think it was important. And his choice of words, "they looked close," made the pit in my stomach deepen. I had to know more. "Could you send me a photo if you have one? Or anything from that night?" I replied, hoping he wouldn't think I was crossing a line. Sam's reply came quickly. "I'll check my files. We had an event that night, and I was taking some candid shots. Give me a minute." Every second felt like an eternity. I paced my office, barely able to sit still, my mind a storm of suspicions and fears that had simmered for weeks. At last, my phone chimed, and I opened the message to find a photo attached. I held my breath as I tapped to open it, and when the image loaded, I felt my heart sink. There she was, Amanda, laughing, her face turned up toward a man sitting beside her. She looked at him with a warmth and familiarity I hadn't seen in months. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her body leaning in toward him, and his posture mirrored hers, as if they were sharing an intimate moment meant only for them. There was no mistaking the closeness, no way to write it off as anything other than what it was. I stared at the photo, my chest tight with a mix of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak. For a second, it felt like the walls of my life were closing in around me, the reality of her betrayal crashing down in full force. Every excuse she'd given, every late night, every small lie, it all led to this moment, staring at an image that made everything painfully clear. She had moved on, found comfort in someone else, all while continuing to live a lie under the same roof with me. I wanted to be anywhere but here, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, but I forced myself to look, to absorb the reality I'd been avoiding. The man in the photo was unfamiliar, but it didn't matter. Whoever he was, he had already taken a place in Amanda's life that once belonged to me. I took a deep breath and called Lily. She picked up after the first ring, her voice immediately warm and concerned. "Tom, is everything okay?" "No," I said, the weight of the truth heavy on my tongue. I got the confirmation I needed. A friend sent me a photo of Amanda with someone else. They looked more than friendly." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then Lily sighed, her voice softening. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted." I felt the beginnings of anger flare up and then dissolve, replaced by exhaustion. I think, deep down, I knew Lily. But seeing it, there's no pretending anymore. I can't keep going along with her lies, acting like I don't know. "I understand," she said quietly. "You deserve someone who respects you enough to be honest. And if she can't give you that, then maybe it's time to start thinking about what you need." I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Amanda, of sitting across from her and watching her try to lie her way out of this, it filled me with dread. "I don't know if I can face her," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to do it alone, Tom. I'm here for whatever you need," Lily said, her words steady, grounding. "Maybe it's time to give her the chance to explain herself, even if it's just for your own closure." After hanging up, I took a long, hard look at the photo again. The part of me that had held onto hope finally broke, accepting the painful truth. That night, I decided that I would confront her. There was no reason to keep pretending. When Amanda returned home, I could feel the tension between us as she greeted me with the same forced warmth, the same empty smile. I took a deep breath and motioned for her to sit down. "Amanda," I started, my voice sharper than I intended. "I think we need to talk about what's been happening lately." About the nights you're supposedly working late. She shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting away from mine. Tom, I don't know what you're talking about. Then explain this, I said, pulling up the photo on my phone and turning it toward her. Her face went pale as she looked at the image, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for words. But no words came. There was no way to explain away the intimacy, the look in her eyes that betrayed everything. After a long silence, she finally met my gaze, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and resignation. Tom, I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want excuses, Amanda, I replied, feeling the cold finality in my voice. I want the truth. And if you can't give me that, then I don't see a reason for us to keep pretending. For the first time in months, I saw her mask slip, a flicker of regret crossing her face. But whatever explanation she might have offered, whatever justifications she had rehearsed, they no longer mattered. The truth was here, staring us both in the face, leaving nothing but the broken pieces of what we once had. As she sat there in silence, I realized that I had already made my choice. I would not be the one to stay in this fractured life she'd created. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I couldn't walk it with her by my side. That night, everything was laid bare. Amanda sat across from me at the dining table, her usual composure fractured under the weight of the photo I had shown her. She had tried to deny it at first, a weak attempt to explain it away as a chance encounter, but her lies unraveled with every word. There was no hiding from the truth anymore, not after what I'd seen. I took a deep breath, feeling a steadiness settle over me that I hadn't expected. I was done playing the role of the husband in the dark, the one who blindly trusted. Tonight, I needed answers. Look, Amanda, I started, my voice calm but firm. I'm not here to argue or to hear another excuse. I just need the truth. All of it. She looked down, fidgeting with her hands, a small, nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. Tom, I never meant for things to get like this, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I held her gaze, refusing to let her off the hook. When did it start? I asked, trying to keep the hurt from showing in my voice. How long have you been seeing him? She swallowed hard, avoiding my eyes. It's been a few months, she admitted, her voice small, as if saying it aloud might lessen the weight of the betrayal. A few months. I felt my stomach twist, a wave of anger mingling with the disbelief that was still lingering. For months, she had been living a separate life, sharing parts of herself with someone else. The Amanda I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger I couldn't understand. Why, Amanda? I asked, feeling my voice crack despite my efforts to stay composed. Why didn't you just tell me if you were unhappy? Why lie, night after night, acting like everything was normal? She sighed, finally looking up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. I didn't want to hurt you, she murmured. I know it sounds ridiculous now, but I thought it would just be temporary, something I could get out of my system and move on. I never wanted you to find out. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. So, what? You thought a fling would fix things? That lying to my face, letting me believe we were okay, would somehow protect me? I could feel the heat of my anger rising, but I held it back, unwilling to let her see the full depth of my pain. I didn't know how to stop, she said, her voice faltering. It was like I was living two lives, and I kept telling myself that it didn't mean anything. But somewhere along the way, I lost control. Her words hit me like a punch. She had known what she was doing was wrong, yet she'd chosen to keep going, feeding the betrayal one lie at a time. I stared at her, wondering how the woman I'd built my life with could have fallen so far, so deeply into deceit. The silence between us grew heavier, pressing down with an intensity one could barely stand. After a long moment, I spoke, my voice raw with pain. Did you ever think about me? About what this would do to us? To our marriage? She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Every day, Tom. I know it doesn't change anything, but I did. I thought about you every day. Then why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why did you keep going? She hesitated, then whispered. I felt empty. I don't even know how it started, but over time, I felt like something was missing. And then, he was just there. He made me feel seen again. Seen? The word stung. Amanda, I was always here. I've been here every day, willing to listen, willing to fix whatever was broken. But you didn't even give me a chance. The weight of my own words hit me hard. I had always tried to be there for her, to keep our marriage strong, and yet, in the end, she had chosen to seek something outside of us, from someone who wasn't me. It was as if the years we'd spent together meant nothing in the face of whatever she thought she'd found. She reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it over mine. I know I hurt you, Tom. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I still care about you. I still love you. I pulled my hand away, feeling the last remnants of warmth drain from me. Love? I echoed bitterly. If this is love, then I don't want any part of it. The finality of my words seemed to hit her, and she broke down, burying her face in her hands. I stood there, feeling strangely detached, as if the person in this room wasn't me. It was as though I were watching someone else's life fall apart. After a long silence, I spoke, my voice flat. I think we need some space. I need time to think. She looked up, her eyes full of desperation. Tom, please, don't leave. We can work this out, somehow. I'll do anything. But I shook my head. I don't think there's anything left to work out, Amanda. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Without another word, I turned and left the room, heading upstairs to gather a few things. I could hear her sobs echo through the house as I packed, each one a painful reminder of the life we had built and lost. When I finally walked out the front door, a strange calm washed over me, as though the storm of betrayal had passed, leaving only the hollow silence of acceptance. I got into my car and drove, unsure of where I was headed but knowing I couldn't stay there, in that house filled with memories that no longer felt like mine. All I knew was that I needed to find a way to move forward, to build a life that wasn't tainted by lies and broken promises. As I drove, I realized that I wasn't alone in this journey. Lily's words echoed in my mind, her offer of support a steadying presence I could lean on. Maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to something real, something honest. But as for Amanda, her chapter in my life was over, a painful reminder of what trust meant and what happened when it was shattered beyond repair. The days that followed were a blur of emotions, each one bringing a new wave of grief, anger, and, strangely, a sense of liberation. Leaving Amanda, packing up my things, and walking out that door had felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. Yet as I settled into a small apartment across town, I felt a weight begin to lift, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I had been reluctant to reach out, to rely on anyone in the aftermath of the confrontation. But Lily had been there every step of the way. Her support had been unwavering, always available when I needed someone to talk to or just sit in silence with. She'd listen, never pushing, never trying to fix things, but somehow always knowing the right words to make me feel understood. It was on one of these quiet evenings, over coffee in her cozy living room, that I finally let my guard down. You know, I began, staring into my mug. I feel like I've been asleep for years, just going through the motions. And now that everything's come crashing down, I'm realizing how much I've lost of myself along the way. Lily reached across the table, her hand resting gently over mine. Tom, sometimes losing something opens the door to finding something far better. I think you're just now starting to see what you've been missing. Her words hung in the air, their simplicity grounding me in a way that felt both comforting and new. As I looked up, our eyes met, and for the first time, I allowed myself to truly feel the connection that had been growing between us. It was unexpected, subtle, but there was no denying the warmth that surged within me. That night, as we sat side by side, the silence between us felt like an unspoken promise, one that needed no explanation. I hadn't planned on moving on so soon, but Lily's presence was more than just comforting. She made me feel whole, seen, and valued in a way I hadn't felt in years. It was a feeling I hadn't known I was missing until now. In the weeks that followed, Lily and I spent more time together. What had once been friendly companionship deepened into something unmistakably more. It wasn't rushed, And it didn't feel like a rebound, it felt like two people rediscovering parts of themselves they thought were lost. I didn't know where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Amanda reached out a few times, her messages a mix of apologies and pleas to try again. But each time, I felt nothing but a quiet, resolute certainty that going back was no longer an option. She was a chapter one had closed, a lesson in trust and honesty that I would carry with me, but nothing more. One crisp autumn evening, Lily and I took a walk through the park, the leaves a mix of gold and crimson beneath our feet. As we strolled, she looked up at me with a gentle smile, her eyes filled with a warmth that melted the remnants of my old wounds. "You know," she said softly, "I'm glad you found your way through all of this. I think it's just the beginning for you." I squeezed her hand, my heart lighter than it had been in months. "I think it's the beginning for both of us," I replied, feeling a quiet confidence I hadn't known before. We stood there, taking in the peaceful stillness of the moment, knowing that whatever lay ahead, we'd face it together. This was the start of something new, something real and honest, open connection free from the lies and pain of the past. And as I looked at her, I knew I was ready to let go of what had been, embracing a future built on truth, trust, and a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace,